So, David, before the break, we talked about we introduced this idea that Senator Elizabeth Warren is going to or is introduced legislation that would call for the U.S. government to manufacture generic drugs when there is a determined market failure. Now, my understanding is there are three potential, I guess, thresholds or criteria,
right,
which, if any one are fulfilled, would constitute that market failure. What are those three situations?
Generally speaking, this Office of Drug Manufacturing that will be created within the Department of Health and Human Services will be able to manufacture these generic versions when in one of three ways. When there's little or no competition within that generic market, like one competitor or maybe two in some circumstances. Critical shortages of a drug, which we're seeing more and more, which is almost unthinkable in a market economy that you would have shortages of a product that there is demand for, but that's what we're seeing. Or exorbitant prices that restrict patient access. In other words, prices that are unaffordable to the average patient.
So any one of those three conditions would constitute a market failure, and then it would basically trigger a response by this government agency that would produce these drugs and provide them. Why do we have a situation where there's a generic drug that is needed, but why nobody's stepping up and producing it? Why would that even happen? Or why would there only be one or two competitors in a market?
There are a couple schools of thought on this. There's a very interesting theory proposed by an organization called Patients Against Drug Shortages, which says this is all about the ways hospitals purchase drugs, where they do it in bulk through these things called group purchasing organizations, that if you don't get that contract, it becomes unaffordable for you to actually manufacture the drug. And so this creates bottlenecks where only one entrant is in a space of a generic drug market, and then that makes it fragile, right? The perfect example of this, and it's not necessarily a drug, but is IV bags with saline solution that are used, every day in every hospital in the country. This had a sole source contract with a company called Baxter, and they mass manufactured their stuff, their IV bags, in one place, Puerto Rico. Now, what happened in Puerto Rico? There's a giant hurricane that knocked out practically all the resources on the island, and it left these hospitals scrambling for IV bags. Now, think about how insane that is. We're talking about salt and water in a bag, and there was a shortage of it. where hospitals thought they wouldn't be able to get salt and water in a bag. That is the problem that comes with sort of a monopolized or oligopoly of manufacturers for a particular drug or medical device or what have you. So one school of thought says it's these group purchasing organizations that are a problem. The other is collusion, this investigation that's going on, where the drug manufacturers are saying, okay, you take the cancer drugs and I'll take the leukemia drugs, and that creates its own set of implications.
I mean, I know there are obviously thousands of generic drugs, but when we're talking about 300 drugs out of 16 companies, and everybody's just basically, I mean, this is like the old style mafia turf, right? Like, you get uptown, I get downtown.
Yeah.
We avoid a war. We just sell in those areas, and that's it. That's the deal we'll make. We're all guaranteed a big income within our little regions here. In this case, it's not an actual physical region. It is simply a market for a specific drug, and this collusion is taking place. And there is, and the problem that we have is not only do we not have the proper antitrust enforcement in this country for years, but even if we did, it is the effort involved in trying to make sure and to prove that this type of collusion takes place is
it's
just
very difficult.
It's very difficult when we can just have a simple fix that the VA has been doing at least since the beginning of this year.
Right. And the reason that this has the potential of working is that within the legislation, explicitly, it says that these generic drugs must be offered at a fair price. It's something that just covers costs and ensures that the actual drug is affordable. Now, the drug would be the generic drug would be perpetually for sale to a manufacturer who wanted to do it, but they would have to adhere to these fair price standards. So you could see a situation where there actually isn't a government factory making these drugs, but they partner with some generic company, private sector company who's a contractor essentially, but they have to adhere to these fair price standards. So you don't have the situation like defense contractors where they plus up all the contracts and sell them to the government at very unaffordable rates. This would be something that ensures that the consumer can get it at a fair price.
All right, David, let me ask you to put your reporter hat to the side, put on your analyst hat for a moment. And how much of this, there you go. How much, the VA, right, theoretically could serve as a proof of concept in terms of successful delivery of medical care, not medical insurance, but medical care, because it does so with, generally speaking, very high favorability ratings from its client base. It does so in providing an incredibly wide range of very, very sophisticated and unique services to a very specific client base, one who has gone through war and suffered all sorts of injuries that we just simply don't see in civilian life. The VA doesn't serve as a very good, because it's sort of sequestered within the military, has not served as like a marketing tool, as a proof of concept in the way that maybe some of us who want to see something like that function. And we only have about 45 seconds here. Do you think if this law passes, it will serve as a proof of concept for the government to do more stuff like this with just 30 seconds?
I think it could. I think that again, this is a hard problem with drug prices. We've set up a system that's almost designed for failure. And any one bill is not going to be the silver bullet to stop it. But if you put in a new system, and one that includes this sort of public option, well, that's broadly applicable to banking, to health insurance, to virtually anything. So, yes, this is something that you can take and run with.
You wear that analyst hat very well as your reporting. David Dayen, always a pleasure.